So after watching your video, Dewey, about your early gaming history, it made me not even want to make this part 2 because I just want to tell people about my love of dinosaurs, and then we can go back and forth and talk about our love of dinosaurs. But they really demanded it. They loved my part 1 talking about the history of MediaCows. So here's part 2. Continuing on, we'll talk about Tom, and I figured since you guys wanted it in the comments as well to see a picture of Raymond with Jesus hair, here it is. This is how I knew him for a long time, back when he worked at Target and Super America, and then he cut it around the time he joined MediaCows to the Raymond that you know now. But yeah, so that's Raymond with Jesus hair. I want to back up though where I ended with part 1 because I kind of feel like I rushed it a little bit because I thought maybe you guys would be bored, but turns out no, you guys are incredibly interested in the history of MediaCows. So if we go back just a little bit, back to the hiring period, I had a friend named Aisha, and she was our brand manager, which meant she was in charge of making the logo for MediaCows. We put a lot of effort on these things. Like I said, the positions of CEO, COO, CFO, we basically went on Wikipedia and looked at all of the positions in a company. And we're like, well, we need to have them all filled. And one of them was brand manager, and I have a friend named Aisha. She's been my friend since I was like in 3rd grade. My mom daycared her, and she was like delving into graphic design. So we're like, oh, we're gonna have this logo of 4 cows sitting on a couch watching TV, and then the TV will say MediaCows. It'll be brilliant. And a lot of this emphasis was put on these like really complex designs, and Aisha then went off to college in Rochester, and I didn't talk to her as much, and she was busy with schoolwork, so she just kind of was phased out of MediaCows. And then Alyssa took over this job and was designing like these cartoony looking cows that are holding controllers, and eventually we just kind of decided, I think Raymond was the one that did sort of like pretty much did the current design of the logo. Just a nice simple outline of a cow head. And that's what our current logo is. But so Aisha, we had so many people in MediaCows, it's ridiculous. Like going to Nick Dom's, Dewey's best friend. I can't remember how he like got involved specifically with MediaCows, like what his first thing was. I know that he knew Japanese, and that was really valuable. He did a walkthrough on Pokemon Black and White, like the beginning of it, and he translated the Japanese version into English for the few parts, and it was really, really impressive. Nick accompanied us to PAX Prime 2010, if I remember correctly. Our first PAX was PAX Prime, not PAX East. So PAX Prime 2010. And when we were looking at this, right, remember I said Penny Arcade was a big influence for MediaCows. I would watch Penny Arcade TV and think, okay, if these guys who were friends and they lived together and just played video games together and drew comics can make it, so can we. And I was really wanting to go to PAX after like becoming a fan of theirs. But we were like, we want to go as press. We think maybe we can do it. So we applied, not really expecting that we would get approved, just kind of like a crapshoot, and we were approved. And that was awesome. And at this time, Austin was still in MediaCows, and Alyssa was in MediaCows. So there were 6 members and 1 freelancer, my cousin Blake. So 6 of us were going to go to PAX, but Alyssa then couldn't go because she had school stuff. Austin couldn't go because he was moving to North Dakota. And so it turned out that it was going to be me, Raymond, Dewey, and Nick Doms. I don't know if I should be saying his last name, but whatever. We drove out to Seattle, because PAX Prime is in Seattle. We took a road trip out to Seattle because we couldn't afford airfare. It was cheaper that way. We took Nick's van? Yeah, it was Nick's parents' van. And we're in Minnesota, so we had to drive through North Dakota and Montana. That was excruciatingly boring. I drove through all of North Dakota. It was all in the night. I was driving like 105 miles per hour in this minivan, this old minivan. Everyone else was sleeping. I was just driving straight through North Dakota, and I drove through a good chunk of Montana. Like, I would not stop driving. We had a deadline. We needed to make it to PAX to get to this IGN Dunkin' Donuts party or something. And Nick Doms was this incredibly slow driver. He drove like 50 miles per hour in 70 mile per hour zones. And Dewey's a fine driver. It's just he wouldn't go as fast as me and Raymond. Raymond then took over once we reached the Rocky Mountains, and we should have videotaped like our reactions. There were a couple things. So we needed to get gas in Montana, and this is when we were about switching over. It was right at the beginning of the Rocky Mountains, and we were worried because we didn't know how many gas stations there were. So we stop at this gas station, and turns out all of us are deathly afraid of wasps, and a wasp gets in the van. If you could film this, every single one of you would love it, because it's me, Dewey, and Raymond freaking out. Nick is freaking out, but Nick is in the back sleeping. He doesn't know what's happening. So we start screaming. We jump out of the van. We're parked at the gas station, so we jump out of the van, and we're like, we can't let the wasp out of the van now, because if it gets out of the van, it's going to chase after us. So we shut Nick in there with the wasp as he's yelling, "Let me out!" So he then grabs like this book and starts beating it and beating it. And he's like, "All right, I think I got it, guys." So we open the door, and it's still alive, and it's flying around. We are like running around in circles around the van, and eventually I think someone kills it or it flies off. So that's story number one. That was just crazy. But story number two is Raymond's driving. It should have been filmed. Raymond does not believe in slowing down on really sharp turns in the mountains. He was going like 80 miles per hour on these extremely sharp turns with small guardrails and cliffs on the other side. Dewey couldn't handle it. Like Dewey's like, the only thing I can do is just pass out, because he could not. He was so afraid. And then it turns out Raymond would get a ticket in Washington. We'd get out of Idaho. That was the most fun. It was Raymond in Idaho driving like a madman. And of course, Raymond's doing like his evil laughing and yelling while he's driving. I didn't want to sleep just because it was so much fun. But we get into Spokane, Washington, and there's a cop trap, and then Raymond gets a ticket. So then Raymond's like, "I'm done driving. I'm too tired to drive." Dewey's out of his mind. He's so afraid. So Nick Doms takes over for the rest of the trip, and that makes us late for the IGN party. So we didn't get our donuts that we wanted to get. But PAX was amazing. So this was an incredible experience because we hadn't been to a convention before. I'd never been to a convention before. The expo hall was so overwhelming. There were so many people there. It was really our first opportunity that we got to talk with PR people. So like Raymond got to interview Matt Grandstaff over at Bethesda for Fallout New Vegas, which was coming out that fall. And remember, like, Fallout 3 is one of Raymond's favorite games of all time. So he was so excited because he's talking to the community manager of Bethesda about the next Fallout game. Turns out Fallout New Vegas, not the best of games, but it was just an incredibly exciting time. And then the drive back sucked because, when you're going a place, you're really excited, and then you drive back and it is really bad. And we were having to race back again because I had school. I was beginning a new semester in college, and we got back at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had school at 8 a.m. So that left me an hour of packing time, like unpacking time, and driving off to school. Nick also had school. And really, Nick phased out because I don't want to delve too much into Nick because you don't even know him. Was in a PAX, like if you go back, there's a PAX Prime video where it's like, we're going to be trying to do as much coverage as we possibly can. Turns out we couldn't do as much work as we wanted to because all we had were flip cameras. We were woefully unprepared, overwhelmed, and we wanted to just have a fun time too. Like Raymond and I would go to Denny's every single night, late at night. We got to know this waitress there. We were staying at a Ramada Inn by the airport, so we had to take this train into downtown Seattle every morning, and it was like 40 minutes, so we had to wake up at like 6 a.m. to get there. But it was a lot of fun. We were tired, but it was a lot of fun. But Nick kind of phased out because he was moving to Japan, and he wasn't doing as much work as Dewey, Raymond, and I. Neither was Alyssa, but I feel like Alyssa was doing a little bit more work than Nick. And so we had to have a talk with him, and that talk had Dewey like really emotional, because when you're doing business with friends, it's really tough because you can't just talk to them as employees, you have to talk to them as friends as well. Also, we still weren't getting paid at the time, so people are like, well, I have other things I need to do, you know, this isn't my #1 priority. And then Machinima contacted us, right? I talked about that the money started to come in. Machinima contacted us. The way that Machinima worked at the time was they had their directors program, and that's where you put up videos on Respawn. And so we got in on that, and we were really, really happy, but turns out it's not the best thing for walkthroughs, because like 30 parts going up on Machinima Respawn does not suit that channel whatsoever. We learned this very quickly after Fallout New Vegas when I submitted it, and it took a few days to go up. And I'm like, you know, people want to see it when the day it comes out, not days afterwards. No one wants to watch it at that point. So then they said to us, well, we have this really special program that's very limited, and we'd like to extend it out to you. And it was partnering channels. And this was a new thing. Now, anyone can pretty much get their channel partnered if you know kind of who to talk to. But back then, very few people were. The only walkthrough guy that was really making money at the time was SSOHPKC, who I assume you guys know, Seamus. And Seamus was a big help to me. Like, I owe a great deal to him. If we go through the times of who was around, right? Ghost Robo, Rad Brad, Tetra Ninja, those guys, they weren't around then. It was us, Mahalo, and Seamus. And Seamus was the biggest. He was the most popular. He was around since 2009. He had a big following. People loved his Fallout New Vegas walkthrough. But he did vlogs talking about how he used to work at Target, and Machinima came along, and now he's getting paid for his videos. And I didn't know that was possible. That's how I found out that it was possible, was through Seamus. Raymond, by the way, worked at Target too. So similar story to kind of Seamus, because Raymond doesn't work at Target anymore, obviously. But so that's how I kind of discovered it. And when Dewey and I found out about that, like Dewey was, we were both tearing up, and he was on the phone with his parents saying, we're going to actually get paid. And fast forward to February, we got paid $27,000 for half of November in December. That's crazy. Like, not only, that was our first paycheck. We didn't know, we went from not thinking we'd ever be able to get paid for this and just be trying to go to E3 to all of a sudden $27,000 for a month and a half. And that just blew our minds. And unfortunately, Alyssa quit like a week before like the paycheck came. The reason why Alyssa quit was because for PAX East, we didn't have enough money for 2 hotel rooms. She was going to have to stay in a hotel room with us, and she wasn't happy about that. She didn't want to do that. She wasn't going to have to share a bed. She was just going to have to be in the same hotel room. And so one thing led to another, and then she quit. And so then it was just me, Raymond, and Dewey. And this was after the fall of 2010, which was a big time for MediaCows. We had Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Call of Duty Black Ops that were big for the channel. And so spring came, and this is actually at the beginning of the year, right? Because I was following Seamus at the time, I started to pay more attention. Again, remember I talked about DSP, these walkthroughs with commentary. And yeah, I followed the Mahalo route a lot, but Mahalo's dead now. Put out of business largely by us. But I felt like I didn't want to watch walkthroughs without commentary. If I wanted help with it, I wanted people to do commentary. If I wanted to be entertained, I wanted commentary. So then we started to do commentary. Our first commentary was Little Big Planet 2, I think. It was me and Raymond. I wasn't very good. Our microphones sucked. And it was a learning experience. Like, that's when we started commentary. It was like January 2011. And at that time, guys like Ghost Robo were starting up. Brad was starting up. And Brad got his big boost with Dead Space 2, which was in February, I think. And so I think the big mistake that I made was I viewed everything kind of as a competition. I always viewed it like, oh, did we beat Mahalo? Did we get more views than their walkthrough? Did we get more views than Seamus? Did we get more views than Ghost Robo later? Did we get more views than Rad Brad? And I think that was a mistake. I think that that's not something that you want to do. You don't want to seclude yourself. You don't want to turn everything into a competition. And you can make friends, and that's the best thing, because then both people can gain. And instead of secluding, that was a mistake. We weren't, though, fully into commentary, right? Like Dead Space 2 we didn't do commentary for. We did like openings, the Welcome to MediaCows, it's part 1. We'd appreciate any support you guys could give us. We didn't do commentary for things like LA Noire or Portal 2. And then things started to change around the time of Infamous 2. And this was around E3. And Raymond kind of was doing that walkthrough, and we were talking, and he was saying, I think we really should do commentary for this. I think it would be better. And so that's kind of when it started. And it continued throughout the summer with Fear. And I made some mistakes. There were a lot of unfinished games at the time. I was kind of overwhelmed. And there were more people that were starting to do it, that were seeing the success that we were having, that Seamus was having. So more people started to do it, and I thought of everything as a competition, unfortunately. And so it was not the best of times that summer. And there was a lot of slacking off that summer, focusing on girls, just kind of living it up, because we all of a sudden had money. I was broke, and now all of a sudden I had money, and I didn't know how to handle it. And so we kind of fell off a little bit. Then we picked things back up in the fall of 2011 with Dead Island, which is one of the biggest series for us. Things like Batman Arkham City, Battlefield, those were huge for us. And there was a game, Dark Souls, and this is where I'm going to kind of leave this video, is the introduction of Tom. So there's going to be another part. It's going to continue, assuming you guys want it. If you guys don't want another part, I don't need to tell any more about the history, but judging by kind of the response you guys gave in the first video, I'm guessing you guys will want to hear the full story and not have me kind of really rush through things. But Dark Souls came out, and this was a game that I knew nothing about because I never played Demon Souls. I just knew it was excruciatingly hard. Raymond never played Demon Souls, Dewey never played Demon Souls, and Dewey played League of Legends with this guy, Tom. And Dewey had talked to us about it, and this Tom was expressing interest in making videos. He wanted to do his own type of channel, but first he wanted to do Dark Souls. He was like, I don't even expect to get paid. If you want to pay me a little bit, that's great. So we struck up a freelancing thing, so he got paid a little bit for Dark Souls. We got paid a decent amount for Dark Souls. Which, Dark Souls, if you didn't watch it, is an awesome Let's Play. I love it. Tom really knows what he's doing. And that was his introduction. That was his in. He was a freelancer then. He was not a media cow. I didn't know if I wanted to start splitting percentage with him at that point. But it did very well for us, and he did a great job with it. So that put him in really good graces with all of us. And he kept on pushing. Like, it wasn't just a one-and-done thing. He kept on saying, what else could I do? What else could I do on the MediaCows channel to help the channel out, to make good videos? And that's kind of the beginning of Tom. So in the next video, I guess I'll talk about, kind of finish up going into this year, Tom being a full-time media cow, and then sort of things that I've learned along the way, advice for channels that are starting up, the things that I think that are kind of necessary for success on YouTube. I mean, we have a decently successful channel, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I've learned a lot, and I have a good amount to share. So I hope you guys are enjoying this series, and if you want me to continue, let me know in the comments, that kind of thing, and I'll see you tomorrow.